Chapter Xuanhuan, the mystical bookstore. Ma Feifei had a dream where he wielded the emperor's sword, full of vigor, unifying the entire Azure Dragon continent, the Azure Dragon's 5 great empires, the 7 academies.
All groveled at his feet. The top 100 on the Azure Dragon fairy list were all added to his harem. Of course, he must have had many more dreams later, with many details he couldn't remember, but those weren't important.
The most important things were power and women. Ma Feifei felt that if his transmigrated life could be like the one in his dream, it would truly be perfect. Ma Feifei had transmigrated. He came to a very, very magical place. Why magical?
Because this place seemed like ancient times in his world, or rather, even more magical than ancient times in his world. The people here cultivated. Just yesterday, he saw someone flying over Watanabe town. Of course, there were even more magical things.
Look at that girl on the street. She even has furry ears on her head, and that stone man who comes with flame effects, brother. Are you sure your fire won't hurt innocent people? For a transmigrated Ma Feifei, all of this was very magical.
But the most magical thing was the mystical bookstore in Ma Feifei's mind. This appeared naturally upon transmigrating, and could also be called the golden finger that every transmigrator must have. Well, let's call it the bookstore system for now.
Introduction. This is a magical system that can greatly benefit you. Just a simple introduction, and that's it. Oh, and it comes with a task. Congratulations on the host's grand opening.
Please hand copy Andersen's fairy tales and place it on the bookshelf to gain a readership of 1. Completion reward: a half-acre of flower fields. The host's cultivation level will increase by a certain amount. Just asking, isn't it amazing? Isn't it awesome?
Others transmigrate to cultivate immortality or open gourmet restaurants. But he ends up with a bookstore. The main point is that he has to hand copy these books himself. What a joke. Since graduation, he hasn't written more than 100 words with a pen.
But as the protagonist with a golden finger, Ma Feifei naturally copied the Andersen's fairy tale story provided by the system. The paper is magical and feels very comfortable to the touch. I don't know what material it's made of.
The pen provided by the system is a ballpoint pen, not a traditional brush, so Ma Feifei spent 3 days after transmigrating, except for spacing out all morning on the first day. The rest of the time was spent copying books.
It wasn't until the 3rd day that I finally finished copying this book, Andersen's fairy tales. It's truly amazing that I finished copying this masterpiece in less than 2 days. As soon as Ma Feifei finished copying,
the book transformed into a golden ray of light and flew onto the bookshelf in the store. The papers became a book, complete with a cover, and so, Ma Feifei's magical bookstore opened its doors. A whole morning passed.
And Ma Feifei moved a small stool to sit at the bookstore entrance, watching the bustling crowd on the street, feeling somewhat dejected. No one came in. That was the most disheartening part. This was the border region, and especially recently,
with the Qin and Chu empires in discord, minor skirmishes frequently occurred along the border. No one had the leisure to read books. This is a world that values martial prowess. No, rather, a world of cultivation. What is reading? It's practically non-existent.
At noon, Ma Feifei was hungry. Feeling the 2 wen coins in his pocket, Ma Feifei sighed. He was probably the poorest time traveler in history. Apart from this bookstore. Well, plus 10 copper coins.
Ma Feifei had eaten steamed buns for 3 days. The cost of living in this world was quite low. 1 copper coin bought 2 meat-filled steamed buns, each as big as his palm. However, looking at the steamed bun shop diagonally across the street,
Ma Feifei felt a bit nauseous. Eating steamed buns was out of the question. Shouldn't I find some work? Otherwise, wouldn't I starve to death? Ma Feifei sat back on his small stool, propped his chin with one hand,
and rubbed the copper coins back and forth with the other, pondering. As for the bookstore, he felt confident. Everything needed a process, didn't it? He believed the magic bookstore could make him a man among men, but before that,
he had to ensure he didn't starve to death. Right, after all, who knew when this copy of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales would welcome its first reader? He might end up starving to death before the reader even arrived. Of course, most
importantly, the system said that to celebrate the opening of the magical bookstore, the first book is free to read. Do you know what free means? It means no money. Well,
so Ma Feifei has to wait for the second reader to come and read before he can have income. Relying on those 2 copper coins in the meantime is clearly unrealistic. But upon closer reflection, Ma Feifei felt like he didn't know how to do anything.
He's good at manual labor. This stuff doesn't require brains, just a bit of strength, and Ma Feifei has no problem with that. He's good at manual labor, but he needs a way in. Ma Feifei has been in this world for 3 days.
And other than knowing the owner of the steamed bun shop diagonally across the street, he really doesn't know anyone else. But the steamed bun shop probably needs someone to do odd jobs. Right. Seeing how tired they are, if I go and apply, I should be selected.
Right. What? Mas kid, you want to come work for me? Just need some food to eat. The steamed bun shop owner looked at Ma Feifei, surprised. Who is Ma Feifei? An aristocrat. he inherited the title of baron from his old man.
Although aristocrats are as common as dogs in the Great Chew, an aristocrat is still an aristocrat, a cut above the common folk. No matter how down on their luck aristocrats become, having them work for commoners is absolutely impossible.
Ma Feifei didn't think much of it. What good are aristocrats? In his memory, his deceased father was an aristocrat, wasn't he? Yes, a viscount even, but besides that shop, what else was there? Nothing. The viscount title was too low.
And the country didn't provide any salary subsidies. Not to mention that Ma Feifei was now just a baron. Apart from being tax-exempt, he had to rely on himself for everything. Haha. Isn't he about to starve to death, old man Wang, you see?
I still have some strength. Helping you knead the dough is no problem at all. Ma Feifei wasn't embarrassed at all. His previous life had been full of social experiences, and he didn't know how many jobs had applied for. Receiving cold shoulders was the norm.
Let alone job seeking. Then what about your bookstore? Old man Wang asked. Ma Feifei's transformation of his family's shop into a bookstore a few days ago had stirred up the neighborhood. You see, this shop used to be a clinic run by Ma Feifei's old man.
Residents of this street would go to Ma Feifei's old man for any injuries. Now that the clinic was suddenly turned into a bookstore, the residents of the street had no place to go for medical treatment, and couldn't help but gossip. What's more,
what even is a bookstore? They couldn't understand it. I can come to help after 5 o'clock in the evening, Ma Feifei said. Ma Feifei naturally knew the importance of the bookstore and couldn't possibly sacrifice the fundamental for the trivial. In this season,
it gets dark at 5 o'clock in the evening, and there are even fewer people on the streets of Watnib town, so closing at 5 o'clock is a relatively appropriate time. Old man Wang looked at Ma Feifei's thin body and finally said,
"Why don't you come over tonight and take a look first?" Take a look. Ma Feifei saw old man Wang sizing up his body and felt a little unconvinced. Was he looking down on him? All right, let's have a look then. Good, if you still want this job after looking.
Then I'll hire you. The pay is 2 copper coins a day. How about it? 2 copper coins can buy 4 steamed buns, or a bowl of plain noodles, or 2 ounces of beef. Sounds not bad, right? It's a deal. The day passed quickly.
And the mystical bookstore remained without a single customer. Ma Feifei, hungry, closed the bookstore door and ran to old Wang's bun shop to help out. Old Wang was busy selling buns in the front and couldn't attend to him.
So he called his wife to take Ma Feifei to the backyard. Old Wang's Wang Liuxi, although rough in appearance, had a gentle nature. Even though Ma Feifei was there to do odd jobs, Wang Liuxi's attitude was very good. You could even say it was respectful.
This is the difference between nobility and commoners. The backyard was actually where old Wang's family lived, similar to a courtyard house, where they ate, drank, and relieved themselves, like Ma Fei.
It was a shop in the front and a small courtyard in the back. In the corner of the courtyard was a shed, and inside the shed was a stone mill. Wang's young daughter was pushing the stone mill to grind wheat. Ma Feifei took one look and rushed to help.
Ignoring the Wang family girl's blushing face, he squeezed her aside and took over himself. Ma Feifei couldn't push it at all. He tried harder, but still couldn't push it. He strained until his face was red, but still couldn't push it. Puff.
The Wang family girl, who had been watching Ma Feifei, finally couldn't help but laugh. She seemed to realize that it wasn't very nice, quickly covered her mouth, her small face flushed red, and she ran away, seemingly embarrassed.
Now it was Ma Feifei's turn to be embarrassed. Why was this thing so heavy? A young lady could push it, so why couldn't he? Ma Feifei felt a little hurt. Hard labor seemed pretty tough too. In the end, Wang Liuxi still sent Ma Feifei to knead the dough.
He thought kneading dough would be easy, but once he started, Ma Feifei felt even more defeated. It was just a lump of flour, estimated to be no more than 10 pounds, but when Ma Feifei picked it up, he found it weighed at least 30. How do you mix this?
Wang Liuxi, standing beside him, moved her hands with agile speed. The lump of flour in her hand stretched and shortened like cotton, stretching and contracting freely. She used practical actions to show Ma Feifei how flour should be mixed.
Ma Feifei felt he couldn't finish this bowl of rice. However, Ma Feifei was quite persistent and managed to knead the lump of flour completely, earning unanimous praise from Wang Liuxi and her daughter.
They not only gave him 2 copper coins but also invited him to a rather sumptuous dinner. Of course, Ma Feifei didn't take the wages, but he could still have the dinner. There was meat, vegetables, and rice. It was delicious.
But looking at his hands trembling even while holding chopsticks, Ma Feifei finally understood the look in old man Wang's eyes at noon today. This job, it seems I really can handle. Ma Feifei finally gave up on this job when he went to sleep at night.
Ma Feifei's mind was always filled with the scenes of Wang Liuxi kneading dough and Wang's young daughter grinding the mill. Thinking for a long time, looking at his hands that he couldn't lift, Ma Feifei sighed. This world is really amazing.
Chapters 1 and 2. The Book Thief. The next day, Ma Feifei got up a little early. The reason he got up early was because he had been lying on his arm, and it hurt terribly, after washing up in the yard.
He opened the bookstore door and carried the small stool to sit in front of the door. Listless. Magic bookstore, Ma Feifei, who was dozing off, suddenly heard someone mentioning his magic bookstore, and immediately perked up, opening his eyes to look.
This was someone who was not well off, wearing a worn-out long robe. Although it was clean, the azure blue robe had been washed and faded. Most importantly, this person was barefoot, couldn't even afford shoes. Looking at her appearance, well,
her face is completely smeared with dirt, all grimy, making it hard to see clearly, but those eyes are quite spirited, bright and clear. Subconsciously glancing at her Adam's apple and chest, Ma Feifei concluded that she was a girl. What's with all this?
None of this is important, so, do you want to go inside and take a look? Our store is opening today, and all the books inside can be read for free today. You're our first customer. Whether we can meet our reading quota depends on you, young lady. Oh.
Seemingly attracted by the word free, the girl's eyes darted around, and she walked in with her bare feet. The mission is about to be completed. Looking at her back, Ma Feifei was a little excited, suppressing his excitement.
Ma Feifei didn't even bother with his little stool and followed her inside. This is what you call all the books in your store. Xuanhuan circled the shop, pointing around, and finally stopped at the book Andersen's fairy tales, and said,
Ma Feifei's little face turned red and he chuckled, saying the new store has just opened, and the books are still on their way. They'll be here in a few days. Xuanhuan nodded casually, took down the copy of Andersen's fairy tales from the bookshelf.
The exquisite cover brightened her eyes, as if it could talk, telling Ma Feifei that she really liked the cover. Andersen's fairy tales, Xuanhuan read aloud softly, her brow furrowing slightly, as if she had never heard of this book. It's a new book.
Never seen on the market before. Very good looking. Why don't you sit down and take your time to read? The shop wasn't big, about 20 square meters, besides the bookshelves around the perimeter.
There were also 4 long tables placed horizontally in the middle, 2 meters long and 80 centimeters wide. In the very center, there was also a sign that read Magical Bookstore. Reading only, not for sale. Reading costs 1 spirit crystal per hour.
Xuanhuan saw it. Her eyelids twitched, but she didn't say anything. She followed Ma Feifei's lead and sat down at a table, flipping open the Andersen's fairy tales with her hands still covered in dirt.
Ma Feifei suppressed his excitement and returned to the doorway, his eyes occasionally glancing at Xuanhuan. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and he had finally taken that step, that whole morning.
Xuanhuan was engrossed in her reading, and Ma Feifei was equally engrossed, except Xuanhuan was engrossed in the book, and Ma Feifei was engrossed in the reading count in the system. But after a whole morning of reading,
the reading count still hadn't changed from 0/1 to 1/1. Ma Feifei guessed that it probably wouldn't count until the girl left. Finish reading the book. What a joke. Although the book in Xuanhuan's hand doesn't seem thick.
Andersen's fairy tales actually has millions of words. Although it's unclear how the book contains so many words. Ma Feifei had opened it and seen that all the stories in the preface were there. By the time Xuanhuan finishes reading it.
Speaking of hunger, Ma Feifei's stomach did feel a bit empty. Glancing at Xuanhuan, who was still engrossed in reading inside, Ma Feifei got up and ran to old Wang's steamed bun shop across the street to buy 2 buns.
Although it's free to read, he's still his first customer, so he should share one of the buns, filled with goodwill.
Ma Feifei hadn't even stepped into his bookstore with the hot buns when he saw a plate of roast chicken and a pot of wine on the table where Xuanhuan was sitting. Xuanhuan was holding a book in one hand and a chicken leg in the other, eating leisurely.
Seeming to sense Ma Feifei's gaze, Xuanhuan looked at him and nodded slightly, as if to greet him. Ma Feifei felt that the look was full of malice. He silently turned around, sat on the small stool, looked at the bun in his hand, and took a big bite.
He heard that a plate of roast chicken costs 10 yuan, and it would be even more expensive to heat up a pot of wine. Thinking of this, Ma Feifei suddenly felt like crying. In the afternoon, Ma Feifei leaned against the door and had a dream. In the dream,
he ordered a lot of food. Even a Manchuan imperial feast appeared. Looking at those delicious dishes with fragrant smells that he couldn't name, Ma Feifei's mouth watered. Then, Ma Feifei woke up from hunger.
Ma Feifei saw a flash of azure blue shadow drift past him, rubbing his eyes. Ma Feifei subconsciously glanced inside the shop, only to discover that the person inside was gone. The book was gone too. Today was a day filled with magic and guilt for Xuanhuan.
Magic because she discovered a very beautiful book. A story inside that she absolutely adored. Guilt because she loved the book so much that she sneakily took it away. It's all the fault of that black-hearted boss, charging 1 spirit crystal per hour.
Xuanhuan stroked the cover of Andersen's fairy tales. She had been reading it all day and had only gotten through a tiny bit. If she followed that shop's rules of 1 spirit crystal per hour, she probably couldn't even afford to read the entire book.
I'll return it after I finish reading it, and compensate him with a spirit crystal. Xuanhuan thought to herself, 2 crystals at most, no more than that. The last time I participated in an escort mission.
It took a whole month and I only received 10 spirit crystals. Giving him 2 spirit crystals as compensation for reading a book should be enough. Zhao Xiaodao's sense of guilt slowly diminished as she thought this. She glanced down at the book.
The corners of her mouth involuntarily lifting into a slight smile, and playfully hummed a tune. Hey you tomboy up there! Stop right there! A roar came from behind, startling Zhao Xiaodao. Without even turning her head, she took off running barefoot.
The sky in Watanab town was already dark. The sunset had passed. A night had arrived. The high moon hung in the sky, its light scattering over this remote border town, adding an extra touch of desolation. Panting, Ma Feifei stood under a large tree.
Hand pressed against his abdomen, looking up at Zhao Xiaodao in the treetop, grinding his teeth in hatred. A book was really nothing to him. But the problem was that the system hadn't prompted him to complete the task.
And the reading volume was still stuck at 0/1. If Zhao Xiaodao stole this book today, Ma Feifei felt that his golden finger might fly away. He could forget about the peak of his life, even survival would be a problem. So today, even if it cost him his life,
he had to get the book back, and so he chased Zhao Xiaodao for more than 20 li, chasing her out of Dubian town. Zhao Xiaodao on the treetop was also breathing slightly heavily at the moment. She had suffered some injuries during her last escort mission,
which had not yet healed, but it seemed that she was recovering quite well today. Using her movement technique hadn't worsened her injuries. On the contrary, her cultivation seemed to have recovered 7 or 8 tenths. However,
running continuously for more than 20 li and using her cultivation had made her breath unstable, and she was quite tired at the moment. Looking at Ma Feifei under the tree, even the usually clever Zhao Xiaodao didn't know what to do.
He was obviously an ordinary person with no strength to truss a chicken. This meant that she couldn't possibly attack him, not to mention that she seemed to be in the wrong in this matter. Although this store charged so much to read a book,
which was black-hearted, they hadn't forced her to read it. What's more, they had let her read it for free for a day. Stealing someone else's book directly seemed a little wrong. Zhao Xiaodao was really helpless with Ma Feifei. As for returning the book to him,
Zhao Xiaodao was 1,000 times reluctant. And so the two of them stared at each other, neither speaking, quietly observing one another. What exactly do you want? Finally, Zhao Xiaodao couldn't help but speak. Give me back the book.
When Zhao Xiaodao lightly leaped onto the tree, Ma Feifei understood that a physical fight would be unwise, but he definitely had to get the book back. So now the only way was to stubbornly confront her. I'll return it to you after I finish reading it, okay?
When it came to the book, Zhao Xiaodao's tone weakened. No, Ma Feifei didn't trust her in the slightest. What's more, this book was created by the system. Right now the system wasn't giving any prompts.
But what if he didn't get the book back today and the system directly erased him tomorrow? Would he even survive? To take a step back, what if it didn't erase him but the system just disappeared? In this bizarre world, wouldn't that be the same as erasing him?
Zhao Xiaodao stared into Ma Feifei's eyes for a short while, and she saw the words no negotiation. But I really like this book. Zhao Xiaodao still softened. If you like it, you can go to my bookstore and read it every day. The moonlight was too dim,
and the visibility was too low. Ma Feifei couldn't see Zhao Xiaodao's expression clearly, but from her tone, he could tell that she seemed to be giving in a little. Zhao Xiaodao opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but ultimately swallowed it back.
Whoosh! Zhao Xiaodao leaped lightly from the treetop. She handed the book Andersen's fairy tales to Ma Feifei. Ma Feifei was stunned for a moment, quickly took it, and without waiting for Zhao Xiaodao to react, turned and ran. Wait a moment.
Ma Feifei ran 2 steps but couldn't resist the curiosity to hear what she had to say, stopped and turned to look at Zhao Xiaodao. Zhao Xiaodao's palm held a small, luminous stone, which appeared crystal clear in the moonlight. Here for you.
Ma Feifei reached out and took the spirit crystal, which was a little cool, but particularly comfortable. It was clear that Zhao Xiaodao was very reluctant to part with this spirit crystal, her eyes constantly fixed on it.
Consider this spirit crystal apology. I'm truly sorry. Zhao Xiaodao left, leaving Ma Feifei with a dashing silhouette. Ma Feifei looked at the spirit crystal in his hand, then at Zhao Xiaodao, and then at the surroundings. Which way was it home again?
Chapter 003 12 Years of Bitter Cultivation. A Sudden Enlightenment. The next day, Ma Feifei got up late, yawning as he opened the shop with dark circles under his eyes. Last night, he stared blankly at the reading count all night long.
Never changed. Afterward, he finally realized that the so-called reading count didn't just mean a glance, it meant reading the entire book. Several million words. Truly insane. Ma Feifei felt that his mentality was already somewhat broken.
He lazily sat at the entrance basking in the sun, feeling that he had no more aspirations. The system, whatever, let it be. Why does that figure look a bit familiar? Ma Feifei looked towards the end of the street corner,
where a flash of azure blue disappeared. The distance was indeed a bit far, and Ma Feifei, being slightly nearsighted, couldn't see clearly. He rubbed his eyes and squinted again. In this world, I can still recognize people well.
The old man Wang selling steamed buns diagonally across the street barely counts, but he's busy selling buns, and he's wearing a grey linen short-sleeved shirt, broad-shouldered and burly. It's completely different from the slender
azure figure I glimpsed earlier. Wait, azure blue figure, the book-stealing tomboy. This instantly energized Ma Feifei, and then for the next half hour, Ma Feifei watched Zhao Xiaodao walk back and forth on this street no less than 10 times.
Every time she passed his bookstore she would glance at it. Although it was very casual, Ma Feifei had been squinting, paying attention to her and saw everything clearly. What you want? Finally, Ma Feifei couldn't help but speak.
Zhao Xiaodao found the sentence somewhat familiar. She stopped, glanced inside the bookstore, looked at Ma Feifei, and said, "Are you talking to me? Otherwise, you've been pacing back and forth in front of my shop more than 10 times.
Slowing your steps by a third every time you pass, sneaking glances inside. Who else am I supposed to talk to if not you? Ma Feifei must be playing dumb. Zhao Xiaodao has been wandering back and forth so many times.
How could he not know what this tomboy is thinking?" Zhao Xiaodao's face flushed red, but it was hidden by the mud, so Ma Feifei couldn't see it. "Can't I just pass by? Is it any of your business?" Zhao Xiaodao snorted and was about to leave. Actually.
You can keep reading, Ma Feifei reminded her. Although Zhao Xiaodao stole her book, he didn't really have any ill feelings towards her. Maybe it was what the girl did later that made Ma Feifei feel much better. Besides,
Zhao Xiaodao was the first person to read this book. If she could continue reading and finish it, it would be the best thing for Ma Feifei. Zhao Xiaodao was a little tempted, but she touched the small sachet at her waist and dismissed the idea.
She glanced at Ma Feifei and said, "Who wants to read your lousy book?" Now it was Ma Feifei's turn to be confused. He clearly saw that she was tempted. Why didn't she want to read it anymore? Was it too much to ask her to read the book in the bookstore?
Watching Zhao Xiaodao's retreating figure, Ma Feifei couldn't help but women are truly magical creatures. How about I offer 5 spirit crystals? Will you let me finish reading the book then? Finally.
Zhao Xiaodao couldn't resist the temptation of Andersen's fairy tales. There was no way the book was just too good. Each little story captivated her, making her feel like she was secretly hiding outside the private school as a child.
That's all I have. Seeing Ma Feifei remain silent, Zhao Xiaodao added, lowering her head. Heaven knows, she had worked hard for a month to earn only 10 spirit crystals. She had spent 4 on cultivation in the past few days.
And yesterday she gave Ma Feifei 1. These 5 spirit crystals had emptied her purse, giving everything she had just to read a book. Zhao Xiaodao felt like she was crazy. Ma Feifei looked at the spirit crystals Zhao Xiaodao handed over with bleary eyes.
A bit dazed, didn't I tell her that she could read this book for free? Did I? I probably did. At this moment, Zhao Xiaodao appeared even more sacred in Ma Feifei's eyes. What is a gentleman? A gentleman is not presumptuous if he asks.
It must be for a righteous cause. This is what it means to be a gentleman. Although Zhao Xiaodao is a girl, that doesn't matter. Although Ma Feifei couldn't use spirit crystals for the time being, he had overheard passers-by mentioning them these past few days.
Spirit crystals were used by cultivators to enhance their cultivation and were incredibly precious. If an ordinary person happened to obtain spirit crystals, they couldn't use them to cultivate, but they could sell them.
The market price for a low-grade spirit crystal was 1,000 gold coins. What could you do with 1,000 gold coins? In the Great Chu Kingdom these days, pork cost 5 copper coins per pound, and beef cost 10 copper coins per pound.
Copper coin turned to gold coins at a rate of 1,000 copper coins per gold coin. 1,000 gold coins could buy so many cows. Why am I using cows as an analogy? 5 spirit crystals, plus the one from last night,
made Ma Feifei feel that even if the magical bookstore disappeared, he could use these spirit crystals to exchange for some money, then buy a few acres of land and a few cows and live out his life in this magical world, like a salted fish.
Can I go in and look now? Zhao Xiaodao asked calmly, seeing that Ma Feifei had accepted the spirit crystals. Look, as long as you don't take them away, you can look at any of the books in the bookstore. Ma Feifei waved his hand generously.
And the 5 spirit crystals fell into his pocket. Judging by Ma Feifei's posture, you'd think his bookstore contained tens of thousands of volumes. Zhao Xiaodao rolled her eyes, not in the mood to pay attention to him. She took a small step, then 2 strides,
then 3 skips, and entered the bookstore. Her playful appearance stunned Ma Feifei. When he came back to his senses, Zhao Xiaodao was already sitting at the table, holding Andersen's fairy tales and reading it. Where did we leave off yesterday?
Was it the little match girl? I think. Inside the bookstore, there was only Zhao Xiaodao's murmuring and the rustling of turning pages. Andersen's Fairy Tales is a collection of fairy tales written by the Danish author Hans Christian Andersen.
Consisting of 166 stories, totaling approximately 7 million words. How long would it take to read 7 million words? Ma Feifei remembered reading a novel of about 4 million words before he transmigrated, which took him 5 days.
And he still had over 1 million words left. It wasn't that the story wasn't good, but Ma Feifei suddenly got bored. How to describe that feeling?
It's like you've been intimate with your partner for 5 consecutive days. You'd probably feel indifferent after a while. Huh, was that me driving? But that's not important.
What's important is that Zhao Xiaodao actually finished this huge book with great perseverance. In half a month, Ma Feifei also admired himself for watching over Zhao Xiaodao for half a month, in these 2 weeks.
Except for the first day when he ran out to pawn a spirit crystal. He spent the rest of the time in the store watching Zhao Xiaodao and counting gold coins. Finally, after hardship comes sweetness.
Congratulations to the host for completing the grand opening mission, receiving a copy of the book A Half Acre of Flower Fields, and increasing cultivation level to the peak of Spirit Master Stage 9. Ding!
A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Please acquire 10 points of book reading progress. Task time 1 month. Task rewards The Legend of the Condor Heroes, Princess Returning Pearl Season 1, and a certain amount of cultivation.
Ma Feifei began to imagine golden light constantly flashing on his body, leveling up with a whoosh. Whoosh! Spirit Master Stage 9. Huh, what stage is that? Never heard of it, but it seems impressive, don't believe.
Or it even says peak. Whether it was psychological or due to the cultivation improvement, Ma Feifei felt that his eyesight had improved, his ears were more sensitive, and his whole body felt full of power. Yet he also felt light as a feather.
As if he could fly just by lightly standing on his tiptoes. Whoosh! Suddenly, Zhao Xiaodao, who had been sitting all along, burst into a beam of white light that rippled outwards like waves. Very magical. Ma Feifei saw it for the first time.
But it doesn't seem to have much power. The white light passes through Ma Feifei and dissipates. Only Zhao Xiaodao's aura suddenly becomes formidable. Her headscarf disappears. Her beautiful long hair moves without wind, and the dirt on her face is now clean.
So beautiful, that's Ma Feifei's first impression. Want to know how beautiful? The Rhapsody on the Goddess of the Luo River describes it. Something about cloud-like hair, raised forehead and red lips and white teeth. Yes, that's how beautiful.
While Ma Feifei is pondering how to describe Zhao Xiaodao's beauty, Zhao Xiaodao slowly opens her eyes in disbelief, stretches out her hands, and whispers, "I broke through." This seems like a skip. Spirit Master level 5.
From Spirit Practitioner level 8 peak directly to Spirit Master level 5, a 6-level jump. Zhao Xiaodao can hardly believe it, but the thick spiritual power within her tells her that she really jumped levels in the Azure Dragon continent.
Cultivation follows the rules of spirit energy cultivation, starting from the lowest level, Spiritualist. It progresses to Spiritual Master, Spiritual Grandmaster, Spiritual King, Spiritual Emperor, and Spiritual Saint.
Each level is further divided into 9 minor stages. The gap between levels is inherently difficult to cross, for example.
The difficulty of progressing from the 9th stage of Spiritualist to the 1st stage of Spiritual Master is comparable to the combined difficulty of progressing from the 1st to the 9th stage of Spiritualist.
There is a saying that every 3 stages is a small hurdle, and every 9 stages is a major hurdle. Zhao Xiaodao began her cultivation at the age of 8, after 12 years of practice, despite her natural intelligence.
She only reached the peak of the 8th stage of Spiritualist. Her greatest dream in life was merely to reach the Spiritual Grandmaster realm and extend her lifespan. But now, she hasn't done anything and she's jumped 6 stages. Oh no!
She did spend half a month reading a book. Although Zhao Xiaodao vaguely felt the spirit energy within her body fluctuating while reading, she initially thought it was just the effect of her earth element cultivation technique. After all, she had been barefoot.
Element properties for cultivation. However, Zhao Xiaodao has had this earth element cultivation technique for 12 years. And it's a low-level technique. It couldn't possibly cause a jump of 6 stages.
The only explanation is this Andersen's fairy tales. Thinking of this, Zhao Xiaodao picked up Andersen's fairy tales, flipped to the first page, and started reading. But she no longer felt that fluctuation of spirit energy. Could I be wrong?
A sudden enlightenment after 12 years of arduous practice. Chapter 4, The Mayor's Son. Night deepened. Zhao Xiaodao left, not even glancing at Ma Feifei. Looking utterly lost, Ma Feifei, however,
was overjoyed. He felt like he could fly. He had overheard a snippet from Zhao Xiaodao. Understanding the reason for Zhao's breakthrough, it turned out that completing tasks not only increased one's own cultivation level but also benefited the reader.
Cultivation improvement through reading. No one would believe it if you said it out loud. Although Ma Feifei had never doubted the abilities of the magical bookstore,
he would sometimes sit in front of the door and wonder why everyone else's transmigrations came with high-end systems, while he got stuck with this blasted magical bookstore system. The entire bookstore had just one book, and he had to copy it himself.
But now it seemed that this magical bookstore system wasn't so bad after all. As a progressive youth of the new century, Ma Feifei doesn't like fighting and killing. Copying books to improve his cultivation level is really the best.
Having understood the effects of the magical bookstore, Ma Feifei naturally has confidence in his bookstore. He didn't even eat dinner and started copying according to the plot of half an acre of flower fields given by the system. Coincidentally,
Ma Feifei had actually read half an acre of flower fields. He went to read this book purely because the author had touched him greatly. After reading it, he discovered that the young girl wrote really well. Unfortunately,
this author had already passed away at that time. This book can actually be called a beautiful girl's swan song. Well, this book tells about her thoughts, gratitude, and perseverance towards life and youth after suffering from a terminal illness.
Just her ability to bravely face death is enough to make Ma Feifei admire her. Although it's called a book, it's actually the author's logs and short stories written on her blog before her death. After the author died, someone collected and organized them
and finally published it, which led to this book. Compared to Andersen's fairy tales, the number of words in this book is not even a fraction of its total, only more than 500,000 words.
But Ma Feifei discovered that it took him 3 days to copy this book of more than 500,000 words. This made Ma Feifei understand one more thing. The length of time it takes to copy a book has nothing to do with the number of words. So what is it related to?
According to Ma Feifei's speculation, it should be related to the level of the book. Since half an acre of flower fields appears after Andersen's fairy tales, then the level of this book must be higher than Andersen's fairy tales, of course.
The higher here certainly doesn't refer to the quality of the book itself. After all, Andersen's fairy tales is a global bestseller, and everyone on the planet has heard of it. If you really compare quality, probably few books can match it.
So it can only be a system formed by the mystical bookstore itself. Then does watching this book give a higher increase in cultivation level? That can only be known when the time comes. However,
what made Ma Feifei happy was that because he had been promoted to the 9th level of Spirit Master, his physique had greatly improved. After transcribing books for 3 days, his hand didn't ache at all. Ma Feifei doesn't understand any kung fu.
But according to his own estimation, he should have been a Grandmaster level figure in his previous life. Yesterday when he was eating, he lifted 1,000 jinstone with one hand. Huatianbem, half an acre of flower field, was transcribed for 3 days.
And still no one visited Ma Feifei's small shop. After finishing the transcription, still no one came to patronize his small shop. But Ma Feifei's mentality is much more peaceful now. This time he doesn't sit in front of the door,
but carries his small stool and sits in a small corner of the store so that he can count money and play. The tinkling of gold coins sounds really good.
How about setting a rule open for business from Monday to Friday and travel on weekends to see the world outside? Ma Feifei thought to himself, touching the gold coins. Having arrived in such a magical world, Ma Feifei was filled with curiosity about it.
Previously, without the economic means or the ability to protect himself, Ma Feifei hadn't dared to think about it. Now that he had money and his cultivation had reached the 9th level of spiritualist, the desire to see the world outside began to grow. Well,
tomorrow is Saturday, a good day to go out for a walk. Let's set a small goal first to explore the entire Xuanhuan town. Heaven and earth bear witness. Ma Feifei has been in this world for almost a month.
And he hasn't even walked a lie outside the shop. Oh, except for that day chasing Zhou Xiaodao, but that doesn't count. Is Xuanhuan town big? Actually, it's quite big. Ma Feifei's shop is located on the edge of Xuanhuan town.
Walking 2 li to the north will take you out of Xuanhuan town, but walking south will take you 50 li to leave it. In Ma Feifei's world, this area would be equivalent to a county seat. Ha! A very familiar opening. This time it wasn't a girl,
but a boy of about 16 or 17, dressed in all white shoes, a white fan. He really looked dashing, instantly catching Ma Feifei's eye. Hello, are you here to read? With a customer arriving, Ma Feifei couldn't bother pondering any longer.
Ignoring the gold coins on the ground, he quickly stood up, a smile on his face, and spoke. So cool! I must go to a clothing store tomorrow and buy an outfit like that. Ma Feifei resolved inwardly. Xuanhuan was taken aback and subconsciously asked, read.
Pointing to the sign standing in the center, reading, 1 spirit crystal per hour, not for sale. Xuanhuan asked, not for sale, and you can't take them out of the bookstore? Ma Feifei replied. Xuanhuan nodded in realization.
Then his expression suddenly turned strange as he pointed at the sign with his fan, asking in surprise, 1 spirit crystal per hour. Ma Feifei nodded, continuing to wear a smile. He could really explain this thing. He couldn't just tell people, bro,
I won't scam you. Look, the books in my store can increase your cultivation. Spending some spirit crystals is worth it. People would have to believe him. So Ma Feifei felt that his bookstore should be renamed Serendipity Bookstore instead of Miracle Bookstore.
Xuanhuan looked at the sign, then at Ma Feifei. Seeing Ma Feifei still standing there with a smile, though a bit dark-skinned, his eyes were clear, he didn't seem like a black marketeer. But 1 spirit crystal per hour to read a book was unheard of.
Watnib town was mostly based on currency transactions with some spirit crystal transactions, but where were those? Weapon shops, pill shops, pawn shops, places that cultivators frequented.
For a bookstore to use spirit crystals as the unit of transaction was something Zhou Guanyu had never encountered before. But that's how the rich are. When they encounter something like this, it piques their curiosity even more.
Zhou Guanyu wanted to see what was so magical about this bookstore, and he casually took out a spirit crystal and handed it to Ma Feifei. Of course, if it didn't live up to its name and he felt deceived, this bookstore wouldn't need to exist anymore. Well,
my dad is the mayor of Watanabe town. Ma Feifei took the spirit crystal, and the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. What can a spirit crystal do? Read for an hour. How much can you read, however?
The bookstore didn't require a minimum of several hours of reading, so Ma Feifei didn't say anything and stepped aside to let Zhou Guanyu enter the house. Zhou Guanyu looked at the surrounding bookshelves.
And only after taking a close look did he realize that the huge bookstore only had 2 books. Ma Feifei awkwardly made a fist and coughed, calmly saying the books are still in transit, and we only have these 2 books in stock at the moment.
Zhou Guanyu was a little unhappy, his fair face darkening slightly, and he felt as if he had been deceived. However, as the son of the town chief, Zhou Guanyu, although young, still had some composure. In an instant his face regained its rosy glow.
But he was determined to have someone come and shut down this bookstore tomorrow. At this point, he had lost much interest in the bookstore, casually took a book, and sat down at the table.
Ma Feifei glanced and noticed that Zhou Guanyu had picked up the newly released half an acre of flower field. Zhou Guanyu's expression while reading was quite varied. At first he was surprised, then puzzled, then surprised again. In short,
these 2 expressions repeatedly appeared on the face of this 16 or 17-year-old boy. An hour, neither long nor short, was enough for Ma Feifei to tire of staring at Zhou Guanyu's satire, after which he retreated to a corner to tidy up his gold coins.
Now that there was a guest, counting money was inappropriate. After Ma Feifei had gathered the gold coins from the floor, a golden flash suddenly appeared before Zhou Guanyu, and the book on his desk vanished, only to reappear on the bookshelf.
Now it was Zhou Guanyu's turn to be surprised. As a 16-year-old level 3 spirit master, he hadn't sensed any sign of the book disappearing before his eyes. Even spirit sect masters couldn't accomplish such a feat. Looking up at Ma Feifei,
Zhou Guanyu couldn't discern his level. He seemed like an ordinary person. Ma Feifei, however, didn't think much of it and walked over to ask, "The hour is up, would you like to renew?" Zhou Guanyu didn't quite understand what renew meant.
But judging from Ma Feifei's expression, it seemed to be asking if he wanted to continue reading the book. The book was quite interesting. Zhou Guanyu had never read anything like it before, although there were many things he didn't understand.
It didn't diminish his love for the book. What surprised Zhou Guanyu even more was that while reading his spiritual energy fluctuated, as if he were cultivating. It wasn't very obvious.
Only when he saw something that resonated with him could he clearly feel the fluctuation of spiritual energy. Zhou Guanyu silently took out 5 spirit crystals and handed them to Ma Feifei, saying another 5 hours however.
Ma Feifei shook his head this time and said, "The store closes at 5 o'clock, and it's 3 o'clock now, so you can only read for 2 more hours." It wasn't that Ma Feifei was deliberately showing off, even when Zhou Xiaoda was reading.
The store would always close at 5 o'clock, because once it hit 5 o'clock, it would get dark, and it would be difficult to see people in the bookstore, let alone read. Ma Feifei had also tried lighting candles, but found it was useless.
Presumably this was a setting of the system itself. Then 2 hours. Zhou Guanyu felt that he should be able to finish such a thin book in 2 hours. Besides, he couldn't go home too late, so he renewed for 2 hours.
But what he never expected was that after 2 hours, when the book flew back to the bookshelf, Zhou Guanyu found that he hadn't even read a third of it. Zhou Guanyu couldn't even remember how he got home.
His mind was full of the plot of the book Half an Acre of Flower Fields, the magical story, the beautiful words constantly rippling in Zhou Guanyu's mind. Then Zhou Guanyu had insomnia. The next day,
Zhou Guanyu rushed to the magical bookstore early in the morning, only to find it was closed. Chapter Oz and 5 Strange Tales. Today is Saturday, and Ma Feifei left early in the morning, carrying dozens of gold coins and 8 spirit crystals.
He would have liked to bring more, but there was no way. He didn't have any more spirit crystals. As for gold coins, well, there wasn't enough room to carry them. He couldn't exactly carry a sack, could he? Besides, society is so dangerous.
And all sorts of strange people are on the streets. You never know. You might just run into a spirit master or a spirit sect expert, if you were to carry a sack of money and get spotted. However, Ma Feifei was overthinking things.
For cultivators, coins are no longer that important. Even if it were 10 sacks of gold coins, they wouldn't rob you, of course. If it were a sack of spirit crystals, Mafefe could expect to be blasted into ashes.
Watanabe Town is a small town in the northernmost part of the Great Chu Empire, bordering the Great Chun Empire. Border towns like this usually have a lot of outsiders, of all shapes and sizes. Because of this, although Watanabe Town is small,
and the hustle and bustle is even greater than in ordinary cities, of course, in places like this, safety is not guaranteed. Everyone relies on their own strength to protect their safety. The town also has a guard.
But they don't really do much at worst. After killing someone, you just run north to the territory of Great Chun, where the laws of Great Chu don't apply. Especially in recent years, with the constant friction between Great Chu and Great Chun.
Watanabe Town has become even more chaotic. But despite the chaos, the town is mostly harmonious, and no one goes looking for trouble for no reason. You have to know that in a place like this, where good and bad are mixed together.
Even the beggar on the street could be a cultivator in general. The security of Watanabe Town doesn't rely on the guard, but on self-discipline. Mafefe, being new to the place, wasn't really aware of all this.
All he knew was that the street was bustling with activity, with people coming and going, walking down the street.
He would stare at the fox people with tails for a while. Then he would look at the dwarves who were no more than a meter tall, and then there were those strange spirit beasts. In this world, moreover, all things coexist.
Mafefe was truly amazed by this world. Mafefe came out today with two main goals. First, to stroll around Watanabe Town and experience the customs and culture of this other world, and second, to understand what this world is actually like.
As everyone knows, the best place to gather information is the tavern. It is a paradise for adventurers, where you can hear many interesting stories and further understand this world. As a border town, it not only borders the Great Chun to the north,
but also the Ninefold Mountains to the west. It is one of the 5 major adventure sites on the Azure Dragon continent. Spirit beasts, rare treasures and exotic herbs, everything is available here.
Passing through the Ninefold Mountains to the west leads to the Zhao Kingdom. 1500 years ago, the Chu Kingdom mobilized its entire national power and opened a silk road from the Chu Kingdom to the Zhao Kingdom.
This road lies within the Ninefold Mountains. It is also the only road that can lead from the Chu Kingdom to the Zhao Kingdom. Of course, if you can fly, that's another matter. Therefore, among the 5 great empires,
the relationship between the Chu and Zhao kingdoms is undoubtedly the best, because the two countries have no land bordering each other at all except for this Silk Road. The so-called Silk Road has now become a sacred place for merchants from both Chu and Zhao,
which indirectly led to Watanabe Town becoming the first stop for Zhao merchants after passing through the Ninefold Mountains. In this world, adventurers and merchants are the most knowledgeable people.
And these people's favorite places to go are taverns and brothels. The latter, Mafefe would never go to, not in this lifetime. The only place he could go was the tavern. The most numerous type of shop in Watanabe Town was the tavern.
You could find a tavern every mile or so. However, to get a comprehensive understanding of the news, it's best to go to the largest tavern. The largest tavern in Watanabe Town is called Adventurer's Paradise.
The reason it can be so big is that it's directly across from the largest trading market in Watanabe Town. Adventurers who obtain rare herbs and miraculous medicines, or inner cores of spiritual beasts from the Ninefold Mountain,
come here to trade and get what they want. After the transaction, the first thing they want is to relax and enjoy themselves. So the Adventurer's Paradise Tavern across the street and the diagonally opposite Yihong House, the largest brothel in Watanabe Town,
are their best choices. Adventurer's Paradise is located in the very center of Watanabe Town. Mafefe wandered over and arrived at the tavern around 2 in the afternoon. Perhaps because of the recent friction between the Qin and Chu kingdoms.
Many adventurers have stayed in Watanabe Town and haven't gone out, waiting for this sensitive period to pass. After all, 200,000 troops from the Great Chun Kingdom 100 miles away are sharpening their swords.
And the Great Chu Kingdom has also stationed 150,000 troops outside Watanabe Town. The adventurers and merchants were more or less affected. Mafefe ordered a pot of finer Yuhi wine and a pound of beef, found a corner to sit down.
And while drinking the world's fine wine, eating beef, he listened to the adventurers in the tavern telling those novel things. Did you hear the Prince of Yan passed away last month, and the one who ascended the throne was actually the second prince, Yan's son?
The Crown Prince Yan was deposed. It is said that it was the late Prince of Yan's posthumous edict. The Yan Kingdom's Prime Minister, Yuan Hongdu, and the Yan sage, Sima Wuji, both acknowledged it. The Crown Prince Yan could only swallow his resentment.
What a pity for Crown Prince Yan. It is said that he was a favored son of heaven and deeply loved by the people of Yan. Tetsk, who told the Yan sage to be the second prince's teacher, and the national preceptor Yuan Hongdu to be his father-in-law.
No matter how much the Crown Prince Yan is supported by the people of Yan, it will be of no avail. This was the topic discussed by the little buddies in front. The Yan kingdom is too far away from the Chu kingdom, and it's also above the Qin kingdom.
Not bordering the Chu kingdom. Ma Feifei only knows that the Yan kingdom seems to be an extremely cold place with only 2 seasons a year, summer and winter. What's even more interesting is that out of 365 days a year,
only 65 days are summer, and 300 days are winter. Why can it be calculated so clearly? Because those 300 days are either snowing or snowing. You can't help but understand. What a magical country. I hope to see it in person one day.
Having arrived in this magical world, his greatest dream wasn't cultivation, but wanting to go out and see it. After all, this world was so magical, so big. 2 days ago, a 6th-level spirit beast appeared on the outskirts of Ninefold Mountain,
killing anyone it saw, and it said that many people died. A 6th-level spirit beast. Those are only encountered beyond the 3rd mountain. I don't know how it suddenly ran out. This was the topic of conversation among the companions on the left.
Ninefold Mountain is one of the 5 great adventure sites of Azure Dragon, and unlike other adventure sites, Ninefold Mountain is famous for its mountain peaks. To call them mountain peaks is actually a bit of a stretch.
Because apart from the 9th mountain being a single peak, the rest are derived outwards, layer upon layer wrapping around the 9th mountain. It's just that each lower layer has a lower altitude and a wider area.
But because Ninefold Mountain has distinct layers, looking like individual mountains, it is named after them. Yesterday, General Bailey arrived in Watanabe town, and it said that General Zhengwu has already submitted his military authority.
It seems that within 2 days, the Chu and Qun nations will be at war. Not only General Bailey but even the Chu sage has come. This time, the Chu and Qun nations are bound to have a fierce battle. The Chu sage is already old. If they really fight,
I'm afraid he won't be able to beat the Qin sage. After all, the Chu sage is already 3,500 years old. This was the topic of conversation among the companions on the right. However, Ma Feifei was clearly interested in this topic.
Or rather, Ma Feifei was interested in that 3,500-year-old. 3,500 years old! Ma Feifei was so astonished by this number that his mouth hung open. In his previous life, China had only 5,000 years of history.
Yet someone in this world could live for 3,500 years! It was simply unimaginable! Chu Sheng, could it be a sage? Ma Feifei stroked his chin, pondering. To be honest, since coming to this world,
Ma Feifei really didn't have much of a concept of cultivation. He had thought about immortals and the like. But this world should still belong to the mortal realm, right?
Could there actually be someone in the mortal realm who has lived for over 3,000 years? For some reason, Ma Feifei felt a sense of longing in his heart. 3,500 years of time, what a life of romance and elegance.
Just as Ma Feifei was sitting in the tavern listening to the anecdotes of the Azure Dragon continent, something happened to Zhou Guanyu over there. He fell ill, to be precise. He was lovesick, ever since returning from the magic bookstore.
Zhou Guanyu had been listless, his mind preoccupied with that book. It's not like that book told some amazing story. It didn't really, it was just some very ordinary, very commonplace things, but somehow, Zhou Guanyu just wanted to see what happened next.
Because that book was truly magical. Zhou Guanyu had lived for 16 years, learning to read at 3, starting his education at 5, and mastering the classics by 8. He had read at least 8,000 books, if not 10,000.
But he had never seen anything like this book. That beautiful writing, that young girl's account of her life, was so captivating, so engrossing, that he couldn't tear himself away. And so, Zhou Guanyu was listless. He didn't eat lunch,
and spent the entire afternoon sitting in the courtyard, staring blankly ahead, his eyes devoid of focus. Guanyu, sister. Zhou Guanyu looked up and saw his sister standing in front of him. Sister, why did you come out? Quickly, sit down.
Seeing Zhou Juling's pale face, Zhou Guanyu couldn't care less about the book at the moment, and quickly got up to help Zhou Juling sit down, complaining, Sister, you're not well yet. How can you run around like this?
Zhou Guanyu and Zhou Juling were born of the same mother, and Zhou Juling was 4 years older than Zhou Guanyu. At the prime of her youth, it's just that Zhou Juling had contracted a very serious illness and didn't have much time left. Cough.
Zhou Juling had just sat down and hadn't even had a chance to speak when she couldn't help but cough, a sweetness in her throat. Zhou Juling quickly covered her mouth with a handkerchief. When she removed the handkerchief, it was covered in blood. Sister.
Zhou Guanyu panicked and got up to run, but was stopped by Zhou Juling. It's all right. No need to trouble Master Huang. Zhou Juling composed herself, took Zhou Guanyu's hand, and with a faint smile on her pale face asked,
Father said you seemed listless today. Are you feeling unwell? Zhou Guanyu looked at his sister, feeling distressed, but he didn't want to show it. At a time like this, how could he be in the mood to think about that book? I'm fine, sister, it's just about a book.
Nothing serious. Oh, perhaps because she had read too much as a child. Zhou Guanyu had grown to dislike reading in the past 2 years. Now, to be so listless over a book. It piqued Zhou Juling's interest. Tell me about it. Seeing this,
Zhou Guanyu had no choice but to briefly recount what he had seen in that book at the Mystic Bookstore yesterday, captivating Zhou Juling. Such a wondrous book exists. Zhou Juling could help but exclaim in amazement after hearing the tale.
Zhou Guanyu nodded and said, "Indeed, unheard of." Zhou Guanyu could be considered a renowned talent, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say he had read thousands of books. For him to utter the words unheard of spoke volumes. Not only that,
But what's even more peculiar is that the bookstore only allows reading, not buying, and charges 1 spirit crystal per hour. Oh, Zhou Juling was also hearing this for the first time, and she was quite intrigued. However, being as clever as she was,
she immediately thought of a question. Would that bookstore be deserted in Wadanib town, while spirit crystals aren't exactly rare? They are the most important thing to cultivators. No one would be willing to spend spirit crystals to read a book.
unless it's a cultivation method. Zhou Guanyu nodded and said of course, otherwise the shopkeeper wouldn't be sitting on a stool counting money to pass the time. What's even more infuriating is that the huge bookstore only has 2 books.
I doubt anyone could make a business out of that. Shall we go take a look tomorrow, sister? Zhou Juling became interested. She also enjoyed reading, especially in the last 2 years as her illness worsened.
She spent most of her time in bed and could only use books to relieve boredom. As soon as Zhou Guanyu heard this, he shook his head like a rattled drum and said, "No, your health is so weak, sister. You should stay at home and recuperate." In the last 2 years,
Zhou Juling's condition had become increasingly severe. She would often faint for a few days at a time, not to mention going out. She couldn't even walk in the yard for long. "Take me to see, please." Zhou Juling still had a smile on her pale face.
speaking softly, Zhou Guanyu heard a different tone in her voice. Looking at Zhou Juling's pale face, he couldn't bear to refuse. "That bookstore is closed today, and it might be tomorrow too. Why don't I have a servant scout it out first?"
"And when the bookstore is open, you can come with me, sister." "Okay." Zhou Juling nodded lightly. Puff! Another mouthful of blood spurted out, and this time Zhou Juling didn't even have time to cover it.
Only managing to turn her head slightly to avoid spitting it on Zhou Guanyu. "Sister, Huang Shi!" Zhou Guanyu supported Zhou Juling, looking at her unconscious form, the veins on his fair face bulging.
And his angry roar echoed throughout the entire Zhou mansion. Rays of light flashed, and the courtyard filled with people.
The audiobook for chapters 1 to 5 of this issue has concluded. Subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell, share and leave your comments. I will continue to update subsequent content.